Russia has amassed around 130,000 troops along the Ukrainian border, equipped with modern military hardware that includes long-range air defense systems, tanks, artillery, and missile systems. Western nations have warned that Russia is preparing for military action, with the U.S. saying it could begin with aerial bombardments at any time. Everything seems set for a major campaign with an aim to push back on what Moscow states are NATO's eastward expansion towards Russia. But there's more to this than what meets the eyes in the first place, and the situation would most likely end in Russia getting trapped badly. There are indications that President Putin may have overplayed his hand this time. In this video, Defense Updates analyzes why the potential invasion of Ukraine by Russia is a misstep that the U.S. will be looking forward to. Let's get into the details. This video is sponsored by the free-to-play online military-themed strategy game, Conflict of Nations, which is played by millions of players worldwide. We talk a lot about military power and tactical plans of different nations on this channel, but what about trying them out for yourself? Conflict of Nations is set in the late 20th and early 21st century, fielding present-day and highly modern battlefield technology. At the core of the game is an exciting real-time combat system placing players in control of an existing nation of this world and its army, pitting them against other gamers in a struggle for world domination. Units are moved across the map in real time, often taking hours to fulfill their assigned mission goals, allowing for a very deep level of strategic planning and integrated tactical execution. Forming lasting alliances or short-lived coalitions is an essential part of the modern military environment. Hence, Conflict of Nations allows players to form cooperative plans and teams in an all-out effort to conquer set objectives through the combined force of arms. Conflict of Nations can be played in PC or mobile. So why wait? Register yourself using the link in the description below and get 13,000 gold reward along with 1 month Security Council membership. Ukraine has around 150,000 troops, which are now in a state of alert. It's likely that the country can add another 100,000 light armed personnel from law enforcement and paramilitary forces. Not only this, Ukraine would be able to summon around 900,000 reserve forces. The 2014 experience also means that this time the troops will be better prepared. In the last few weeks, the country has received a lot of sophisticated arms from the West, like the Javelin anti-tank missile, which could inflict a lot of cost on Russian forces. Another aspect is that a limited military campaign may not fulfill Russian objectives, and a permanent occupation will be required, which is a different ballgame altogether. As seen in Afghanistan, there is a high probability that Russian forces will face insurgency and get bogged down. One of the key strategic objectives of Russia is to stop the expansion of NATO, but the invasion of Ukraine may have the opposite effect. Together with Austria, Cyprus, and Malta, Finland and Sweden are the only EU states that are not members of NATO. Sweden and Finland have stayed outside NATO, partly due to their traditional policy of not aligning to any military alliance. At the same time, both countries have aimed at close cooperation and interoperability with NATO. For example, Finland has finalized its $9.4 billion purchase of 64 Lockheed Martin F-35s and support services, whereas Sweden is the first non-NATO member to acquire the Patriot missile defense system. The United States is an important and close partner of Finland and Sweden, and the three signed a trilateral statement of intent in 2018 on their defense relationship. Russian aggression in Ukraine could potentially see Sweden and Finland making moves to join NATO. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the immediate threat level was reduced considerably. Laxity crept into NATO when it came to upgrading military hardware. NATO member countries have drifted a bit in their geopolitical outlook too, and have not been on the same page on several issues. But all this is going to change if President Putin invades Ukraine. Moscow's actions will put the alliance back in shape. The U.S. has been asking NATO members to pull their weights and increase defense spending, and this is exactly the outcome invasion of Ukraine will achieve. A hawkish and united NATO is the last thing Russia will want. One of the major reasons for the collapse of the Soviet Union was that it was unable to keep up with the arms spending of the US and NATO, and the same situation could unfold again. The US and the West have clearly stated that Russia will be punished with a slew of far-reaching sanctions if it invades Ukraine. While there are a lot of debates regarding the effectiveness of sanctions, there's no denying that there is an adverse impact on Russia because of existing sanctions. The sanctions imposed after Russia annexed Crimea in 2014 have hurt the Russian economy to a significant extent. Foreign direct investments have plunged by 50%, disposable income of Russians have plummeted by around 10%, and the ruble fell about 50% with respect to the dollar. We all know that the sale of military hardware is a key source of foreign revenue for Russia, and even that has been impacted badly. For example, Indonesia, Algeria, and Egypt have pulled out of deals to buy Russian Su-35 fighter jets since Russia is not able to import certain key components for the aircraft because of sanctions, and this reduces its combat effectiveness. The new sanctions will be even harsher, with probable exclusion from SWIFT banking communication system and blocks on Russian financial institutions from trading in dollars. An economically weak Russia will eventually become militarily weak too. The EU is dependent on Russia for oil and gas supplies, but this relationship is not a one-way street. Oil and gas account for 2/3 of all Russian exports and funds about half of the federal budget. Aggression from Russia will force EU members to reduce its dependency, with Nord Stream 2 likely to be an immediate casualty. A strategic wish of the United States has always been that it does not want its NATO allies to be energy hostages of Moscow. Few EU nations, like Poland and Estonia, have already decided to set up nuclear power plants to achieve their energy needs. It will also enable the U.S. to become a major exporter of liquefied natural gas and possibly replace imports from Russia slowly. Russia will be forced to make investments to sell its fuel to China, and it will also be at a lower rate. It will have much less geopolitical maneuvering space and reduce its leverage on the West significantly.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this. Hit the like button if you find the video interesting, and kindly provide your feedback in the comment section. This will help us improve.